Welcome to the Age of Vision radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark, where we constantly remind you that love is greater than fear and happiness is resistance. Hi, this is your host, Lonnie Clark, with the Age of Vision radio show. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to give you an update on our show. I'm only going to be posting one podcast a week, and for half of this show, I will be finishing up Dr. Caldicott's book. I'm probably going to read for like 35 minutes. Her book is called The New Nuclear Danger by Dr. Helen Caldicott. She gave me permission to read it. And I want to thank those of you who have been following my podcast and listening to me read her book. She gave me permission. I decided we needed to do it because it talks about Star Wars. We are on page 137, and we don't have too much farther to go, actually. We've gotten pretty much through the book. I think we've got like another 50 pages left, and then we'll be finished. So let me get through this reading, and I'm going to read as long as I can. And then I want to give you some of my opinions and a little bit of an update on the show, because I'm changing the format, and I think it's going to help improve the show. And so I'm looking forward to the new year, producing just one show a week and perfecting it and making it better and better. So let me get through this book in honor of Dr. Helen Caldicott and giving me permission to read her book. It is Dr. Helen Caldicott, The New Nuclear Danger, George W. Bush's Industrial Military Complex, which, as we all know, is no longer George W. Bush's. It's just whoever is sitting in the White House. It's their industrial military complex, which right now is at the hands of a lunatic. This book was written in 2002, so let's get right on it. We're on page 137, and we are in the 8th chapter, or the 7th chapter. It's called Space, the Next American Empire. New subtitle, The History of Nuclear Devices in Space. Over a period of decades, while Russia launched more than 30 nuclear reactors, America has launched only one. Some of these Russian reactors have crashed to Earth, permanently polluting swaths of hundreds of miles of potent, long-lived radioactive material. The most serious Russian nuclear space accident occurred in 1978, when a Cosmos 954 satellite carrying a nuclear reactor smashed into the Northwest Territories of Canada. Sizable amounts of radioactive debris were distributed over a 600-kilometer path from Slave Lake to Baker Lake. 50 large radioactive fragments were recovered, along with other chunks, flakes, and slivers. But also, a wide area stretching southward from the Great Slave Lake was also affected by smaller scattered particles from the reactor core. The total search covered 124,000 square kilometers over the Northwestern Territories. These carcinogenic radioactive particles posed a serious risk to the population because they could either be inhaled or ingested through the food chain. The most recent Russian accident happened in 1996 when its Mars space probe, carrying a half a pound of plutonium-238, not a nuclear reactor, fell from space. President Clinton urgently contacted the Prime Minister of Australia, offering to help when it thought that the probe would hit Australia. Instead, it fell into the less politically important countries of Bolivia and Chile. And international concerns ceased. Not a word was uttered again about the risk to biological systems or to human life. Russia is not alone in its nuclear space accidents. The most significant U.S. accident occurred in 1964 when a Transit 5 BN3 satellite with a SNAP plutonium power system crashed. Some 2.1 pounds of plutonium-238 were dispersed around the world. A report prepared in 1989 by the health and radiation agencies in Europe stated that a worldwide sampling program carried out in 1970 showed SNAP debris to be present on all continents and at all latitudes. Small quantities of plutonium-238 are used to provide electricity to space probes, which is generated by the decay of heat of radioactive element. Plutonium-238 is used because it has a shorter half-life than plutonium-239 and therefore produces more heat. Dr. John Goffman, Professor Emeritus of Medical Physics at the University of California, Berkeley, relates that the accident to a subsequent worldwide increase in lung cancer. Wow, relates that accident to a subsequent worldwide increase in lung cancer. Between the U.S. and Russia, there has been a 15% accident rate in both countries in space programs. New subtitle: Nuclear-powered space probes. Despite these disasters, NASA has continued for 30 years to use plutonium-238 for its space exploration power systems and has launched a total of 25 missions with radioactive power packs. Plutonium-238 is 280 times more carcinogenic than the more prevalent isotope plutonium-239. Glenn Seaborg, plutonium-239's discoverer, called plutonium-238 the most dangerous material on Earth. And plutonium-239 is almost the most carcinogenic substance known to the human race. As previously stated, 1 pound, if adequately distributed, would induce lung cancer in every human being on the planet. 1 pound. Wow. NASA is playing with the most deadly of materials with seeming impunity, evidently not caring if one of its rockets malfunctions and sprays plutonium-238 on countries that happen to be located beneath. Previous plutonium-238 fueled NASA missions included the Apollo lunar scientific packages and the Pioneer, Viking, Voyager, and Ulysses deep space probes. More recent missions include the Mars Pathfinder mission, launched in 1996, and the Cassini mission, launched in 1997. Footnote: the Cassini was just crashed into Saturn last year. Back to the book. Future NASA plans include plutonium-238 powered systems for Pluto Kuiper Express mission scheduled for launch in 2004, the Europa Orbiter mission scheduled for 2006, and the Solar Probe mission for 2007. The Pluto Kuiper Express mission will require about 16.3 pounds of plutonium-238, and the Europa Orbiter and Solar Probe missions will require about 6.6 pounds. 8 plutonium-238 fuel RHUs will also be required for each Mars Surveyor mission over the next decade. Approximately 30 will be launched. Each plutonium-238 capsule will weigh 0.7 pounds. Small amounts of cerium-242 and curium, I don't know how to say this, curium, C-U-R-I-U-M. Small amounts of curium-242, curium-244, and cobalt-57 will also be required for scientific instruments. Each of these radioactive elements is almost as toxic as plutonium. According to the General Accounting Office report, Space Exploration Power Sources for Deep Space Probes, NASA is contemplating 8 more nuclear-fueled electric generator space missions by 2015, which we've already surpassed, so no doubt they've already done it. Health consequences of plutonium-238 production. New subtitle. By law, the Department of Energy is responsible for the supply of plutonium-238 for the space program. Historically, the military reactors and reprocessing plants at Savannah River, South Carolina, were used to manufacture this plutonium. However, these dangerously polluted facilities were closed down in 1996 at the end of the Cold War, determined that plutonium-239 for bombs was not needed. Plutonium-238 and 239 were manufactured in parallel. Because the plutonium-238 supply of the U.S. was limited, in 1992 the DOE signed a 5-year contract with Russia to supply it. In 1997, this contract was renewed for another 5 years. But because the long-term viability of Russian plutonium could be in jeopardy, and the inventory of plutonium-238 for space missions might be depleted by 2005, the DOE is considering restarting old military nuclear reactors or using civilian lightweight water reactors for its plutonium-238 production. I think that's what they're doing, actually. Episodes of worker contamination are frequent. The plutonium-238 for the Cassini mission was manufactured at Los Alamos Lab. The total amount of radiation exposure increased during this production period at Los Alamos, and the number of people contaminated with plutonium-238 rose from 139 to 244 between 1993 and 1995. Wow. More recently, 8 more Los Alamos workers were exposed to plutonium-238 and potentially dangerous levels in March 2000. These people received medical treatment, but in truth, there is no effective way to decontaminate workers since plutonium-238 has entered their bodies. Significantly, the European Space Agency has developed high-efficiency solar space cells to replace nuclear generators. In 2003, this agency will launch its Rosetta probe to travel beyond the orbit of Jupiter and to rendezvous with a comet named Wirtanen, the first such probe. Wirtanen is 675 million kilometers from the Sun, where the sunlight is 20 times weaker than on Earth. If solar power is capable of supplying a very small amount of electricity needed for these missions, why does NASA persist on using plutonium-238? To ascertain the source of pressure for nuclear space probes, follow the money. For many years, General Electric made the nuclear space systems. Now this lucrative business has been subsumed by Lockheed Martin. Over the years, both companies have lobbied long and hard for nuclear space systems. Los Alamos National Laboratory and Oak Ridge National Laboratory are also heavily invested in the development of nuclear space systems. The militarization of the space program has had a significant effect upon NASA's nuclear commitment. One reason that NASA insists on using nuclear power instead of solar power is because the military is enthusiastic about nuclear weapons in space. And that's why I'm reading this book, you guys, because they're about to launch this out. One recent NASA plutonium-238 space launch was the Cassini-Saturn probe, which flew atop a Lockheed Martin Titan IV military rocket. Cassini carried 72.3 pounds of plutonium-238, more plutonium than had ever been launched into space. The Titan IV rocket is an unreliable, dangerous old rocket with a 1 in 10 record, one catastrophic accident in every 10 launches. Not long after the Cassini launch, 3 Titan rockets blew up, either on the space pad or shortly after launching the NASA-designed Cassini to circle Venus and then a return towards Earth via a gravity assist slingshot in order to increase its momentum to Saturn. Cassini circled the Earth above the atmosphere at 42,300 miles per hour with an altitude of 700 miles on August 1999. Luckily, unlike Apollo 13, the vectors were accurate and the Cassini with its plutonium load did not enter the atmosphere to disintegrate and spread its deadly cargo across the planet. In its final environmental impact statement, NASA said that if the flyby did not go as planned, these people are insane. If that flyby would not have gone as planned, there would not even matter what they wrote. Okay, let's get back to this. In its final environmental impact statement, NASA said that if the flyby did not go as planned, the Cassini made an inadvertent re-entry into the atmosphere. The plutonium-238 would have been released, and approximately 5 billion of the world population at the time would receive 99% or more of the radioactive exposure. NASA also acknowledged that if the plutonium rained down on areas of natural vegetation, it might have to relocate animals. If it fell on agricultural land, it might need to ban future agricultural land uses. And if it rained down on urban areas, it would have to demolish all or some structures and relocate affected populations permanently. Dr. John Goffman of the University of California, Berkeley, who is also the co-discoverer of uranium-235, predicted a death toll of 950,000 people would result of a Cassini accident. The Outer Space Treaty specifically states that states shall be liable for damage caused by their space objects. However, in 1991, NASA and the Department of Energy drew up a space power agreement to cover American nuclear flights using the government-sponsored Price-Anderson Act as its basis. Price-Anderson allocates a domestic liability of $8.9 billion in the event of a nuclear accident, but just $100 million for damages occurred in all foreign nations. This is so insane. And this is actually the real reality of what these laws are all about, you guys. It's completely nuts. New subtitle: Nuclear-Powered Rockets. At the 36th Joint Propulsion Conference in Huntsville, Alabama in July 2000, at least a dozen papers were presented devoted to space propulsion using nuclear thermal rockets, and they're called NTRs. This particular project has been terminated in 1973 because of growing anti-nuclear feelings among the U.S. population, but it is now back on the drawing board. Stanley Borowski, a nuclear engineer who manages the NTR studies at NASA's Glenn Research Center, enthusiastically sees NTR as a three-fer, offering 3 mission types for the price of a single engine. We could use it to fly missions to the moon, to Mars, and to near-Earth asteroids, all with the same vehicle, he said. As one of NASA's spokesmen, Borowski speaks to audiences ranging from kindergarten to retirees and receives a nearly uniform response. He must be a very persuasive speaker because the audience are enthusiastic. Why hasn't this country developed this option yet, they ask. Some add that the NTR could be used for defending space systems, for reboosting the International Space Station, and for the eventual colonization of Mars. As if we have a right to go and colonize Mars. Like, this is the absolute just underlying foundation of the insanity here, as I'm reading, is just makes your head explode. I mean, I get it why people just check out on this, because really any sane person's like, what the hell are you talking about? This is just absolute insanity. And ding, 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 you're right, it is insanity. But it's an insane stew that we're cooking in, so we got to look at it and figure it out. And we have to demand, I'm going to keep going back to this. We have got to demand universal education. because we need a lot more kids to get educated. We need a lot more scientists. This is so outrageous that we're starving our poor little children who are brilliant and could become nuclear scientists and biochemical engineers. We need people to understand this stuff. Back to the book. How about that? I'll just stick to the book and not my opinions for right now. Russia will participate in the NTR program because they developed robust nuclear fuel rods that could be used in the nuclear engine. It has been suggested that the Air Force invested in a small part of its budget in development in the nuclear thermal rocket, which could be used to assist the North American Aerospace Defense Command in the tracking and defense of U.S. space systems. Borowski predicts that the rocket could be ready to fly in 10 years. NASA and the Department of Energy have recently undertaken a major public relations campaign to sell the nuclear rocket to the public. A conventional rocket could take up to a year to get to Mars, they explain, but the nuclear option could cut the travel time in half. NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, will be coordinating work with the nuclear rocket with Los Alamos National Lab, NASA in Cleveland, and the University of Florida's Nuclear Engineering Department. Do you get this, folks? They have stuck this nuclear contamination all over our country. In January 2000, the 17th Annual Symposium of Space Power and Propulsion, 600 conferees from NASA, DOE, Aerospace Corporations, nuclear academia, and the Air Force met to discuss the expansion of nuclear power in space. NASA scientist Roger Leonard, who works with the Marshall Space Flight Center, said, "Want to go to Mars quickly? Detonate some nuclear warheads, and months later, you're there." He had another proposal. How about a nuclear-powered space tug capable of deflecting a comet or an asteroid headed to impact the Earth? Less exotic proposals focused on using nuclear power to fuel human exploration and colonization of the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. New subtitle: Nuclear-Powered Weapons. Some of the weapons that are currently proposed in the Star Wars plans include laser beam weapons, particle beam weapons, and others will require orbiting nuclear reactors for their power sources. What? The 1996 Air Force Board report, I want to start that sentence again. The 1996 Air Force Board report points out that because power limitations impose restrictions on space-based weapon systems, making them relatively unfeasible, a natural technology to enable high power is nuclear power in space. Wow. The report's authors seem amazingly confident that their ideas will be viable. Setting the emotional issue of nuclear power aside, they said, this technology offers a viable alternative for large amounts of power in space. Let's just blow everybody up. How about that? Who cares about life on any planet? Ozone depletion and the space program. New subtitle. Quite apart from the obvious dangers of nuclear war, nuclear accidents, and the like, many of the efforts that make up America's space-based defense program presuppose ongoing and continuous launching of rockets into space, posing the imminent danger that the ozone layer will be seriously damaged. Solid fuel used in U.S. rockets and in the space shuttle releases chlorine atoms into the atmosphere. Oh, that's just great. The space shuttle, for example, releases 240 tons of concentrated hydrochloric acid at each launch. Chlorine, which splits off from HCl molecule, is a substance that combines with and destroys ozone molecules. Scientists in 1989 predicted that if NASA continued to launch solid fuel rocket boosters at the rate of 10 per year, this would induce a 10% depletion of the ozone by 2005. Yet the number of civilian and military launches have increased alarmingly since that prediction was made. For each 1% decrease in stratospheric ozone, there will be a 4 to 6% increase in skin cancer. Wow. So it's a 1 to 4 increase. We are experiencing these effects in Australia, where we see a proliferation of skin cancer clinics within our cities, and where the hole in the ozone layer of the southern hemisphere is larger in the year 2000 than ever before. Wow. That is really a shock. Where did I stop? I'll keep going. I'll read a little bit more. I think we're at, 25 minutes? New subtitle, International Concern. At the opening of the Conference of Disarmament in Geneva in January 2000, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan called for the nations to join together to maintain space as a weapon-free environment. China received wide support for a proposal to create an international legal instrument banning the testing, deployment, and use of any weapons, space systems, and their components in outer space with a view of preventing the weaponization of outer space. Nevertheless, the U.S. is attempting to block the proposal and has. They actually did get people to sign this international treaty, but the United States will not. That's what's happened in the last 17 years. International concern about the American plan is so great that in November 2000, 138 nations voted in the UN to reaffirm the Outer Space Treaty, specifically stating that space be set aside for peaceful purposes. The motion titled Prevention of an Arms Race in Outer Space. As noted, only the United States and Israel abstained. The Clinton administration quietly acquiesced to the pressure exerted by the military-industrial complex to militarize space. With George W. Bush in the White House and an administration staffed by major hawks enthusiastic about a full-blown Star Wars systems, many of the proposals discussed above will become reality unless we rise up and use our democracy in an efficient and passionate way. Well, that's the end of Chapter 7, and I'm sorry, Dr. Caldicott, to just, as you have found out, nobody rises up anymore, and I think that's why I was like spitting nails last week, because it seems like people just don't care. Like, they don't rise up. I actually have this. This is kind of timely. I got something from David Barsamian when he was here at our fundraiser for KEPW. He sold me 3-4 CDs from his alternative radio in Boulder, Colorado. That's another really great radio station run by David Barsamian. It's called alternativeradio.org, and you can go and listen to them online. And they do like a lot of talk show things. Like there's one by I bought these CDs from him. Pushing Back the Corporate Food Regime, Native American Holocaust, Rise Up and Resist. That was from Chris Hedges. And then Haley Pessin, The Radical Legacy of Fannie Lou Hamer. And are people rising up? Like Chris Hedges, Rise Up and Resist. This is from Boulder from September 2018. This is a pretty recent CD. This was his speech. People aren't really rising up. Like, they're just like, no, think not. We think, well, interesting, but no, they don't. And yet, in ways, they are rising up because we are pushing back a little bit. I mean, this yellow coat protest, these people are like, we're having a little French Revolution. I wanted to read to you, as I am wont to do on my radio show, read to you from The Way of Life by Lao Tzu. And for those of you who are not familiar with me on my radio show before, I read from this translation by Lao Tzu Witter Biner. It's called The Way of Life. And Lao Tzu was a Chinese poet and a politician pretty much in his time. This is what they tell us. Legends as to Lao Tzu are more or less familiar. Immaculately conceived to a shooting star, carried in his mother's womb for 62 years and born, it is said, white-haired in 604 BC, he became in due time keeper of imperial archives in Luoyang. And we have lots of his poetry. And the poetry is actually really, it's amazing to believe it was written, I guess, 2,500 years ago, maybe 2,600 years ago. But some of it is as much as you can possibly believe that it fits us so well. This is one of my favorites. It's number 12. The 5 colors can blind, the 5 tones deafen, the 5 tastes cloy, the race, the hunt, can drive men mad, and their booty leave them no peace. Therefore, a sensible man prefers the inner eye to the outer eye. He has his yes, he has his no. I like that because that's exactly where you have your own locus of control, right? Here's one about water and the breath of life. This is really great. I love this one. The breath of life moves through a deathless valley of mysterious motherhood, which conceives and bears the universal seed, the seeming of a world never to end, breath for men to draw from as they will, and the more they take of it, the more remains. If only that were true anymore. It is not true. And mostly because of radioactivity. They're killing our planet. I believe that we are in the midst of World War III. I think we are starting in World War III. And I want people to really comprehend this, that it is up to us, that happiness is resistance. And what that means is there's a lot to live for. We have a lot of really great things, and we are living. I mean, one of the things that's happened with me over the course of interviewing people for the last 3 years, I'm kind of sick of hearing about the levels of radioactivity. To me, it's just a given. We are contaminated. Didn't you hear in this book? There was plutonium that was spewed all over the planet. And plutonium it's all cumulative. They have been doing this nonstop. We had over 2,000 bombs dropped on us after World War II. It wasn't just one bomb. We got bombed repeatedly by every country on the planet. And you read these hints in this book. The hints is they're moving all these militaries. You think Russia isn't doing all kinds of things? Oh my gosh. And you know what they're getting over on is that the fact that radioactivity doesn't kill you and drop you dead right now. There's a story in Cleveland. Where is it? I'm going to pull it back up. Unbelievable in Cleveland. They're about to allow radioactivity to be spewed all over. Ohio House OK's use of radioactive contaminated oil and gas brine as a salt replacer to keep the snow off. Unbelievable. As a de-icer. They're going to, and they call it brine like it's food. Like it's something easy, right? It's not something easy. It's not food. It's radioactive contamination. And the House of Ohio said, yeah. So it's going to the Senate. And so I hope if there's anybody out here that knows anyone in Ohio, call up the Ohio senators and say, absolutely not. Let me tell you the number of this bill. What's the number? I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong link. Let me see. The House. The House is House Bill 393, which heads to the Senate after passing it from the House 52 to 31, and this was passed on December 6th. So we've been past 6 or 12 days. I hope it's not too late of a reporting so that you guys can actually, if anybody's in Ohio, you can call up your senators and say, don't be absolute lunatics. And in fact, telling our government not to be absolute lunatics, the public comment period up at Hanford, the Department of Energy, and I've been talking about this since October, they've extended the public comment period at the Department of Energy about not converting that radioactive waste into low-level radioactive waste. And we need people to go to the Department of Energy website. You can actually, you know what's an easy place to go to is go to Hanford Challenge. Get used to going to Hanford Challenge because they're really a great support system. They have a link on their page that will connect you directly to the website on the, oh my gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? It goes directly to the Department of Energy, and it will link you in there. And if you can't find it, you can call them, and they'll show you how to get there. But I really recommend that people get used to going to Hanford Challenge and reading about it because they report on it. They have a very active web page, hashtag not on my watch. That's what this is all about. That it's the comment period. Let me go back. They have a scrolling thing. It says thank you. At the top of their defense thing, it says comment period for the Hanford Challenge release. Thousands urge federal government to drop proposal to reclassify high-level nuclear waste at Hanford. More than 2,000 people are urging the Trump administration to withdraw a controversial proposal to reclassify 70,000 gallons of high-level radioactive waste in a cluster tanks near the Columbia River. This is just insanity. So what happened is because so many people wrote on there against it, they are leaving the comment period open in the hopes that they can get some of their nuclear shill people to say, hey, what a great idea. And then they'll say, well, we have 2,000 people saying yes, 2,000 people saying no. So, okay, let's go with the yes, because that's what they do. It's called the Nuclear Rubber Stamp Commission. It's not Nuclear Regulatory Commission. DOE plans to make a final decision on radioactive classification by fall of 2019. So please go to Hanford Challenge and take a look at their website and find these links because it does matter. It does matter. Our participation in our government matters. This is, in fact, what's wrong with our government right now is we don't have people participating. You know, we actually really absolutely need people to participate. You know, right now in America, people are going, yeah, the Yellowcoats protest in France. That's how you do it. They're the, you know, yay, French people for standing up. But those people in the Yellowcoats, they are not going up against police officers with guns. So that's the one thing that most of us in America, in the subconscious brains, that's the thing that we're not talking about. The United States, we have a highly militarized police. If we had people out in these yellow coats blocking anything, like what they're doing is they're blocking the petroleum from going through France as a way of stopping the system. And so they're putting their bodies in the way, 200-300 people in a day, so that the cops, they can't clear everybody because they don't use guns. There's no bullets being shot. Could you imagine what would happen if that happened here? Oh Lord, we'd have straight up. People would be digging their guns out of the mountainsides, which, you know, there's plenty of guns buried in the mountainsides in this crazy country of ours. It's kind of beyond comprehension that we're having to live through this and that our children are going to have to live through it after we're gone, you know. And this is what I'm counting on. I'm counting on them being better than us. I'm counting on them being way better than the criminals that have been running the show since Pinochet took over Chile. I mean, that's just beyond comprehension how all of that worked. And that is really the Alan Greenspan plan. You know, you go in, you disrupt the government, you throw it over, You have some military leaders who back up the El Presidente, and the cabinet or the parliament or the Congress don't say anything, and boom, you have fascism installed. That's how it works. And then on paper, you have a democracy. That's what they have in Russia. In fact, that's what we have here in the United States. Look what happened in Kansas. The elections were completely stolen. And we have to right now, the Democrats are like, oh, I don't know if it's going to be good for us to impeach Donald Trump. If you can't impeach Donald Trump, who can you impeach? The guy is an open traitor. Like, literally, his kids are about to get indicted by Mueller. Didn't you guys see what happened today with Cohen's filings? When Cohen got sentenced, they brought up the fact that there's 5 people inside the Trump administration who wrote the checks to Stormy Daniels knowingly against federal the federal election laws, knowingly. I mean, it's beyond comprehension, but it's a reflection of the la-la land that we live in. Which is why I'm going to keep doing these radio shows, because I think people need to know about it. I think, like me, before Fukushima happened, I really honestly believed that our government was helping us. There was no way I thought in any way possible that Barack Obama would stand in front of a microphone and tell us all that everything was great, and then load his 2 kids up on an airplane and go to South America for 3 weeks. That is exactly what happened. Doing, da-da-doing, doing. We're just constantly being set up. So here I am again, urging people to actively engage in the face of absolute corruption. But that is what I'm doing. I do want you to engage in the face of absolute corruption. Because love is greater than fear. Because we have the capability of facing it. Because we're here. It's actually not... I guess this is like the good part about radioactive contamination, is it's not an immediate killer, but it is sure a nuisance. And it causes autism, it causes diabetes, it causes autoimmune deficiency diseases, it causes schizophrenia, on top of the cancers and leukemias, That, how many of us don't have friends or family that have cancer? Nobody. I mean, I think it's ironic that everybody's like, oh, fossil fuels are killing the planet, and not one of these climate change activists will even acknowledge that radioactivity might be causing harm to the microscopic life in the planet and harming the food chain all the way up, even though we have big gaping eyesores where nothing grows. Hanford, 400 square acres or something like that, and nothing grows in large portions of these places. In the desert, in Nevada, before they started doing the nuclear bomb testing, it used to have plants and shrubbery, and now it's just completely devoid of animals. I mean, it's beyond comprehension. The slow drip to just, okay, we'll just follow you off the cliff, 'cause it's easier. Not me. And I hope not you. And I'm glad that you're listening. And I want to thank everybody out there who's been listening. I'm going to be posting my radio shows up once a week instead of twice a week. And on KEPW, I kind of come to terms with the program director. I'm going to be posting my show at 11 o'clock at night. I'm switching out on Thursday nights with Libby Halevi's show, simply because I cuss and she doesn't. And she'll be on at 7:30 in the morning on Saturdays on KEPW. And both of us really appreciate being on KEPW and being in the Willamette Valley and being able to be heard in Oregon and on the internet. I mean, those of you who do listen to us on the internet can tell that the signal is obviously much, much stronger. KEPW is what do they call that? A low power tower, right? So when you're driving around, you might hear some sketchiness. But if you listen to KEPW online, you don't get that. Obviously on Spreaker. People can find my podcasts on Spreaker. And I also post up Nuclear Hot Seat on my Spreaker channel. That's Spreaker, Spreaker. And it's a podcast, I guess, hosting site. And you can look up The Age of Fission, and you can subscribe, like and subscribe to my channel, and you'll get notified every time there's a brand new podcast going up. I post up Nuclear Hot Seat on her own show, and I post up The Age of Fission on the own show. And I'm developing some other ideas, but I've got to get this down. So I've decided to cut back the Age of Fission radio show so that I can do it more efficiently and just hopefully make it a better show. But the premise of it is going to be that we're beyond contaminated. I'm sick of talking about if we're going to get contaminated. We're contaminated. I don't want to talk about the radio, the levels. What's the Geiger counter saying? Where's this say? Because guess what? We're all contaminated. The question is, how do we live in it? How do we recognize it? How do we keep ourselves well? That's the kind of thing I want to talk about. And I'm not a doctor, and I'm not, any type of physician or anything like that, but I am a person who understands health and nutrition because I've made myself healthier from actually following the things that I'm going to tell you about as we move forward, because I think it's important for us to share these little hints on how to keep our bodies well in the age of fission, because we have a choice. It's not just do you want to be right or you want to be happy. It's really, do you want to be healthy or do you want to just indulge in whatever it is, chemical and sugar thing they want to put in your body. I mean, we need to avoid sugar, that's for sure, because sugar is a cancer magnet. I think most people know that. Avoid the chemicals, and for goodness sakes, don't be pouring that coffee creamer in your coffee. That is petroleum byproduct, folks. Make that one of your goals, not to eat any petroleum byproducts, because there's lots of them there. If you shop the middle aisles at the grocery store, a lot of those additives that makes the food smooth and creamy, that's just petroleum byproducts, and they allow it in little tiny levels. Yes, insanity. Yes, it is insanity. So, needless to say, I'm going to be doing the radio show once a week on Thursday nights. It'll post up on Spreaker same night on Thursday. And actually, Nuclear Hot Seat will probably post up, plays on KEPW on Saturday. I am going to be finishing up Dr. Helen Caldicott's book. I believe next week or the week after, I have an interview with Dave Parrish again. I haven't really gone after interviewing anybody, mostly for this reason that I'm really I'm sick of us talking about it. I want us to stand up and become a force where your elected official does not want to see your name pop up on their dial because you continue to call them and say, close the nuclear power plant near me. If you have a nuclear power plant near you, you should be working on getting it closed down, because there is not one good nuclear power plant. It's just completely insane. Those are not two things that go together. So, and I don't know if any of you know about the metaphysical causes of healing, but Louise Hay wrote a really great book called It's called Heal Your Body. And she basically talks about the mental causes of physical illnesses and the metaphysical ways to overcome them. And how you do it basically is you reprogram your brain with positive affirmations, and it helps your body heal. And these are some of the things that I have done. So let's look at cancer, since we talk about cancer. I mean, why does one person get cancer and another person doesn't? So, DNA damage. But you're more prone to it if you have these metaphysical things that have gone wrong in your life. According to Louise Hay, the metaphysical cause for cancer is deep hurt, long-standing resentment, deep secret or grief, eating away at the self, carrying hatred, saying, what's the use? And the way to overcome that is you repeat these affirmations. I lovingly forgive and release all the past. I choose to fill my world with joy. I love and approve of myself. And it is that very thing, isn't it, folks? The self-love recovery program that we're all on the path to do. And I encourage you, if you're not in your self-love recovery program, please bump into it, because it does matter. We need everybody to love themselves and function at a level of loving energy and openness so that we can come up with solutions. So anyways, I'm going to end here. I'm going to insert in Dave Parrish's Fuku Friday, and we will talk to you guys next week. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to be reading the book next week from Dr. Helen Caldicott. We'll be finishing it up. Put your courage feet on, and that means do it afraid. Take action. 8 minutes a day. That's what Dave says. 8 minutes a day. Even if you only take 2 minutes a day, it's better than no minutes a day. Call one of your elected officials and let them know that you object to them ignoring the contamination that's going on in our planet. Tell them that you object to them codifying and normalizing radioactive contamination. And for goodness sakes, if you live in Ohio, call your senators right away and tell them, do not pass that plan to spread nuclear contamination as a de-icer all over Ohio. That's the most insane thing I've heard. Honestly, that's just completely crazy. So put your courage feet on, you guys, and remember, happiness is resistance and love is greater than fear. We'll talk to you guys next week, and Merry Christmas.
8 minutes to celebrate. 8 minutes to remember. 8 minutes to renew and understand that we have only just begun the fight for Fukushima, and it'll be someone in the next generation to finish it. Hey y'all, it's Dave here from Operation Save the Earth, and this is the Fuku Friday Happy Hour Hangout for December 7th, 2018. Today marks the 77th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Like 9/11, this event has shaped American history, and to this day, some people still hold a grudge about it. Sure, Allied forces eventually triumphed in World War II, and Japan has been a solid ally and trade partner ever since, but still, resentment is in the voices of those who choose to remember December 7th, as President Roosevelt called it, a day that would live in infamy. My question to the grudge bearers is this. You still have a thing against Cuba for what allegedly happened to the USS Maine in 1898? How far back are you going to go to hold a grudge exactly anyway? You see, the problem is after the Fukushima nuclear disaster began in March 2011, I heard some people say it was karma for Pearl Harbor. Really? You won the war over 60 years ago and now you say karma. Man, I say bullshit. Listen, there comes a point when forgiveness has to kick in, or else you're stuck in your grudge like a mosquito in amber. Why not just hate on the French for the War of 1812 while you're at it? What really galls me is when these people fail to take into account the many, many infamous things the U.S. government has done since World War II. I can guarantee you that the cost in human lives in that arena dwarfs what happened on the morning of December 7th, 1941 by multitudes. And worst of all, these atrocities are still happening today. It's only in the last few weeks that Congress has started to shift its stance on the war in Yemen that we've been backing for Saudi Arabia for no real reason other than money. How many billions of dollars have been spent in Afghanistan over the past 17 years, where we've been at war since 2001? How many families have died during drone strikes in that time overseas? It's time Americans learn that infamy has a price and to own it. When a Syrian child dies crossing the Mediterranean to seek refuge, that's on us. When kids are separated from families at our borders, that's on us too. When kids in Fallujah are born without arms because we used depleted uranium weapons during the Gulf War, guess whose fault that is? And sure, it's easy to put off the responsibility. They did it, right? the evil government that we voted into power and have let run amok since 9/11, not us. But if you talk to a vet or a relief aid worker about who's really to blame, you start to realize that person is in your bathroom mirror. Okay? I blame myself for not trying to stop the first Gulf War more because every other war that's followed has been bullshit. Right? You know, back in the old days, it took an act of Congress to actually declare war, but now any yahoo in the Oval Office can do it with a stroke of the pen or a tweet, as the case may be. The late great R&B singer Marvin Gaye once wrote that war is not the answer, and in order to end the cycle of violence, we must start with forgiveness. If you let grudges define you, that's all you'll ever be. And if we keep holding something against Japan for something that happened 70 plus years ago, especially after they've already paid for it in human suffering many times over, then what are we doing? Trapping anger and amber and not getting a damn thing done. And believe me, guys, we have got lots to do, don't we, Fuku fighters? I mean, we have not even really begun this fight for Fukushima yet. And, you know, this roadblock has got to go away, right? So it's up to us to remove it along with following our 4 steps that we have to take, right? Take step 1 for yourself. Share the information about Fukushima with all your friends, with everybody who will listen, because guess what? CBS just did a 60 Minutes piece on it. It's not, just harmful internet rumor anymore. This is a real thing that's affecting every single one of us to this day. So, let's get on it. Let's do our work. Let's take step 1 together. Go to our website at OperationSaveTheEarth.com. If you haven't already, get caught up there. Send your friends over there so they can get caught up too, right? And then when you and they are ready for it, send me an email at info@OperationSaveTheEarth.com and I'll put you on our weekly mailing list to get our free newsletter that comes out every Monday morning. And also, don't forget, check us out on Twitter. You can follow us at OSTE 8 Minutes, all spelled out, to get the latest Fukushima news of the week and be in the know. Guys, I cannot stress to you how important that is, all right? Now, let me tell you a story about Japan in 1945. My mom, Yaeko, was just a little girl who hated walking to school because it was up a long hill. But when she did, sometimes she could see U.S. bomber pilots clear as day as they flew by. One day toward the end of the war, they dropped bombs on her city and killed her auntie who was raising her. 10 years later, she married a U.S. serviceman and moved to New York, where she began to raise a family, including me. Without forgiveness, would I be here talking to you? Would I be working hard every day to fix the problems at Fukushima Daiichi? This holiday season, gang, remember the real reason for the season: peace on earth and goodwill toward all men, women, and children of the world. Together is how we get things done, and together is how we will move things forward. So until next time, this is Dave saying peace and good fortune to everyone. Take care till then.
The Age of Fission radio show brings you book readings, pertinent articles, interviews with both activists and victims of nuclear and environmental contamination. We strive to deliver only the facts from reliable sources. We want to remind you that love is greater than fear, and happiness is resistance. Our dedication to love and happiness paves the road for innovation and healing. As we face our harsh reality, let us hold each other up and rejoice in our humanity. If you want to comment, please send your thoughts to ageoffission@gmail.com. That's AGEOFFISSION @gmail.com. To your host, Lonnie Clark.